Lena and Mia had always been inseparable. Their friendship had survived childhood squabbles, teenage awkwardness, and even the silent distance of college years. Now in their early 20s, they shared a modest two-bedroom apartment on the edge of town, its walls adorned with Polaroids, shared mementos, and strings of fairy lights that cast a warm glow across the small living room. Friday night came like any other. Rain drummed softly against the window panes as Lena curled up on the couch with a mug of tea, scrolling through her phone. Mia was in the kitchen, washing dishes, humming a tune Lena couldn't quite place, but recognized from their childhood. Normally, the melody was comforting, a reminder of endless sleepovers and laughter. But tonight, it made Lena uneasy. The timing was slightly off, a note here and there missing, just enough to make her pause. She blinked and shrugged. Maybe she was imagining it. They shared dinner, spaghetti, garlic bread, and cheap red wine. They laughed over old memories, inside jokes from school days, the time Lena had thrown a shoe at a teacher, the awkward crushes they had shared. Everything appeared normal, but Lena couldn't shake a gnawing sense of wrongness. The first subtle disturbances were minor. A book on the shelf she had never seen before, its spine curling and words obscured as if eaten by time. The kettle had been on the counter for hours, though she was sure Mia had turned it off. And the shadows, oh, the shadows, moved differently than they should. They lingered just a moment too long, elongated unnaturally, stretching across walls as though studying her. Lena touched the book, flipping it open to blank pages. "Did we have this before?" she asked. Mia shrugged, her expression casual. "I don't think so. Maybe I picked it up last week." The explanation was plausible, but Lena's unease didn't subside. Later, when she lay in bed, she thought she heard whispers, soft, indecipherable, curling around the edges of her thoughts. At first, she told herself it was the rain or imagination. Sleep came fitfully, punctuated by dreams of mirrors reflecting Mia with slight, impossible distortions, eyes too large, smiles too wide. Lena awoke, heart racing, to see Mia sleeping beside her, perfectly normal, or so she told herself. The next morning, the city outside was shrouded in gray mist. Commuters hurried along the sidewalks, umbrellas bobbing like synchronized dancers, oblivious to the quiet dread settling in Lena's chest. She brushed it off, attributing it to exhaustion, but the feeling of being watched persisted. Every object in their apartment seemed slightly off. The couch's cushions were rearranged, photographs tilted, and the kitchen faucet dripped in a rhythm that didn't match the steady rainfall outside. Throughout the day, small coincidences piled upon each other. Lena's phone flickered with brief, unidentifiable notifications. The sound of footsteps behind her when she was alone in the apartment. Glimpses of movement in the corner of her vision, gone when she turned. And Mia remained the same, warm, familiar, unbothered. This was the worst part. The consistency of her friend's normalcy contrasted with the subtle wrongness surrounding them, making Lena question her own senses. By nightfall, Lena's unease had deepened. She dreamed of shadows creeping across the apartment, stretching and contorting into forms just barely human. Whispers coiled in the corners of her mind, almost forming words. When she woke, the whispering lingered faintly, impossible to locate, impossible to ignore. Despite the creeping dread, Lena couldn't help but cling to the comfort of Mia's presence. She was the anchor to reality, the only thing that felt unchanged. But the smallest anomalies, misaligned photos, the wrong notes in a song, shadows that seemed sentient, made Lena's chest tighten in a rhythm that matched the whispers. It was in this delicate balance, between the familiarity of friendship and the subtle intrusion of something else, that the story began. Lena was still safe, or so she thought. The world appeared normal, the apartment familiar, the person beside her unchanged. Yet the first cracks had formed, tiny fissures in the veneer of her reality, whispering that nothing was truly as it seemed. By the time the clock ticked past midnight, Lena lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. The whispering was softer now, almost melodic. She could feel a presence, distant but persistent, pressing at the edges of her mind. The rain pattered against the window, rhythmically echoing the small, insistent heartbeat of unease. And as she drifted toward reluctant sleep, she thought she heard Mia's voice, whispering not from across the bed, but from the shadowed corners of the room. Remember us. It was soft, almost like the wind, but Lena knew, deep in her gut, that it was not the wind. White heavy checkmark Chapter 1 Summary introduces Lena and Mia, their deep friendship and normal life. Foreshadows subtle disturbances, misplaced objects, off shadows, whispers, altered music. Builds psychological unease, while keeping the environment relatable. Ends with the first whisper of supernatural tension, preparing for escalating horror. The next morning, Lena woke to the faintest sound of humming, a tune familiar yet impossibly off. Mia was in the kitchen, moving dishes around, but the rhythm of her humming lagged slightly behind her movements, as though she were a fraction out of sync with herself. Lena's chest tightened, a small spike of unease she couldn't shake. Breakfast was silent, punctuated only by the soft drip of the faucet and the occasional hum. Lena's gaze kept drifting to subtle oddities. The apartment, once familiar and comforting, seemed to shift in ways she could not explain. Cushions on the couch were misaligned, the coffee table slightly tilted, photographs on the wall crooked by millimeters. It was small, almost imperceptible, but enough to unsettle her. She tried to laugh it off. "You must have moved some things," she said, attempting casual tones. Mia smiled, but the warmth in her eyes seemed diluted. "I don't think I did," she said softly, washing a plate. "Maybe it's your imagination?" The explanation was plausible, but Lena's intuition screamed otherwise. By midday, the apartment felt different. Shadows stretched unnaturally across walls. When Lena looked directly at them, they seemed to hesitate, freeze, or retreat just beyond her line of sight. Light from the street filtered in through the blinds, creating geometric distortions that played tricks on her eyes. She felt watched, not just by Mia, but by the apartment itself, or something hiding within it. Her phone began to betray her. Notifications appeared and disappeared in rapid, impossible sequences. Messages from unknown numbers flashed, cryptic phrases like, "Why are you looking?" and "She isn't yours anymore." Lena's hands trembled as she stared at the screen. That night, sleep offered no refuge. She dreamed of shadows lurking just beyond corners, taking the shape of Mia, but distorted, grinning with a false warmth. In her dream, the whispers grew clearer, forming words she could almost understand. "She belongs to us, she remembers, she waits," she tried to scream, but could not. The next morning, Lena noticed small, physical changes in Mia. Her movements lagged fractionally behind her words. Her eyes occasionally glimmered with an expression too precise, too deliberate, almost mechanical. Lena's stomach twisted with fear. Was it possible her best friend had been replaced? Or was her mind unraveling under stress? By midweek, the apartment itself became a labyrinth. Doors creaked in ways they hadn't before. The hum of the refrigerator, the drip of the faucet, even the squeak of the floorboards seemed like communication, directed at her, observing her. She began documenting the changes. Objects misaligned, lights flickering in irregular patterns, whispers that came and went. Every day, the apartment seemed to grow stranger, folding reality just out of reach of reason. Then came the note. Lena returned from work one evening to find a single sheet of paper on the living room table. The handwriting was eerily familiar. It mirrored Mia's, but the words were alien. "You are not alone. She is watching. She waits for you." A chill ran down Lena's spine. She spun toward Mia. "Did you write this?" Mia shook her head, calm but distant. "No, I don't know what you mean." The impossibility pressed in on her. A draft curled through the apartment, though no windows were open. The shadows seemed to pulse with intent, stretching and curling like fingers. Lena realized that the whispers were not confined to her dreams. They had begun to infiltrate waking life. Sleep became a battlefield. Lena lay awake for hours, straining to hear anything beyond the ordinary. The soft drip of water, the faint hum of electricity, her own breathing. And then she heard it, a faint whisper coming from the corner of the room, repeating her name. She froze. Lena. It was soft, melodic, taunting. Her reality began to fracture. Across the street, she thought she saw Mia, or someone perfectly resembling her, standing still, staring at their apartment window. When she blinked, nothing remained. The line between reality and hallucination blurred. Shadows shifted with purpose. Objects moved subtly. And the humming never stopped, always slightly delayed, never matching Mia perfectly. By the end of the week, Lena understood a horrifying truth. Whatever had entered her life was patient, careful, intelligent. It wasn't just an intruder or an illusion. It was something that could manipulate space, sound, perception, and perhaps even the person she loved most. Her best friend might still be Mia, or she might not. The apartment, once a haven, had become a cage. Every corner, every reflected image, every sound held a threat. Lena's heart raced as whispers formed barely audible phrases in her mind. She is not yours, she watches, you cannot escape. And in the darkness that night, Lena realized the final, terrifying truth. The horror had already begun, threading itself through the fabric of her life. Her senses could no longer be trusted. Her memories were suspect. Even the woman she had called her best friend for years might not be real. The disturbance was complete. Something was inside their home, inside their lives, inside Lena's mind. And it was patient. The apartment had changed overnight. Lena awoke to walls that seemed closer, ceilings that felt lower, shadows curling unnaturally around corners. The humming that had once belonged to Mia now filled the entire space, coming from every direction at once. It was too precise, too deliberate, as though the apartment itself were echoing her friend's voice, but wrong, distorted. She stumbled into the living room and froze. The note from the previous night lay on the table, unchanged. Another piece of paper had appeared beside it. She is waiting. You cannot leave. She knows you. The handwriting was undeniably Mia's, yet Lena knew Mia had not written it. Fear clawed at her chest. The whispers were louder now, forming fragments of words she could almost understand. She remembers, she watches, she waits. Mia, Lena called, voice shaking. No response. Only the humming continuing, surrounding her, pressing in on her mind. She moved cautiously toward the kitchen, heart hammering. The faucet had turned itself on, water dripping rhythmically, matching the rhythm of her heartbeat. And then she saw her, Mia, standing perfectly still in the corner, her back straight, her eyes fixed somewhere beyond reality. Lena, Mia said softly. Her voice was right, familiar, but wrong. It was slower, too controlled, like a recording slightly delayed. Lena's stomach dropped. Who are you? She whispered, taking a step back. Mia's head tilted, impossibly, in a way that shouldn't be physically possible. I am Mia. I am me, and I am not. You cannot leave me. You will join us. Lena stumbled backward. The wall seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting, reflecting dozens of images of Mia, all slightly different. Some grinned, others were twisted in silent screams. The humming swelled into a chorus, each echo slightly delayed, overlapping, haunting. Lena's mind ached. She ran to the bedroom, throwing the door closed. But the whispers followed, seeping through the wood, curling under the door like smoke. Lena grabbed her phone, shining its light into the corners. Shadows writhed, taking shapes too precise, too alive to be mere tricks of the light. She realized the entity, or whatever had taken her friend, was not just a presence. It was intelligent, patient, and fully aware of her every thought. Lena. The voice came from behind her, soft, sweet, and coaxing. She spun, and Mia, or the thing wearing her face, was suddenly there, reflected in the mirror. Her movements were exact, but her expression was off, a fraction too perfect, too calm. Lena felt bile rise in her throat. You have to let me go, Lena pleaded. This isn't real. The reflection smiled, and the lips didn't quite match the sound of the voice. It is real. You always knew. You just never saw. Now you must choose. Lena's chest tightened. She realized the truth. The being in front of her was not Mia. It was a copy, a shadow, something that had consumed her best friend and could replicate her perfectly. And it was patient. It had been observing her, learning her habits, waiting for her to let her guard down. Tears blurred her vision. I won't let you take her. You already have, the reflection said softly. Shadows from the corners of the room coalesced, forming a dense, almost liquid darkness that pulsed with intent. And you will either join her, or be erased. Lena's mind raced. She had no weapons, no escape. Every exit seemed blocked. The apartment had become a cage. She thought of the whispers, the notes, the distortions. The thing wanted her to surrender, to submit to fear, to dissolve into the endless chorus of voices it had gathered. Summoning every ounce of courage, she made a choice. She would fight, not physically, but mentally. She focused on her memories of the real Mia, their childhood, the times they had laughed, the secrets they had shared. She called out to her friend's essence, even as the imposter in the mirror lunged forward. "Mia, remember me. Remember us," she screamed. The shadows recoiled, flickering. The mirror cracked, the humming faltering. The creature hissed, a sound that was not quite human, not quite Mia, as if her will alone forced it to hesitate. Lena pressed herself against the reality she knew, the tangible memories of friendship that the thing could not fully mimic. For a moment, everything was still. The apartment seemed to catch its breath. And then silence. Mia was gone. The shadows dissolved into the corners. The humming stopped. Lena sank to the floor, shaking, tears streaking her face. She realized the battle had been won, but the victory was hollow. Something had been inside their lives, inside her mind, and while she had resisted, the memory of it remained. She knew she could never trust shadows again. Every reflective surface, every flicker of movement, every sound could be the thing returning. But she had survived. That was enough. Yet, as she glanced around the apartment, she noticed one small detail, a faint, almost imperceptible smile lingering on a photo of the two of them. Lena's blood ran cold. It wasn't over. The confrontation had revealed the truth. Fear can invade, twist, and replicate, but the strength of genuine connection, memory, and love could resist, even if only temporarily. Lena had faced her deepest fear, losing her best friend to something unnatural, and survived. But she understood, now, that survival would carry a price. The whispers might return, the shadows might come back, and Mia, her real best friend, might never truly be safe again. The apartment felt different the next morning. It was still, quiet, almost sterile, as though it had exhaled after the storm. Lena sat on the edge of the couch, her hands trembling slightly, replaying the confrontation over and over in her mind. The shadows had retreated, the humming had ceased, and the mirror reflected only her own terrified face. But victory felt hollow. The apartment remained suffocatingly familiar, yet subtly wrong. A book that had never been there lay on the shelf, its spine curling, pages blank but brittle. A single chair was facing the wrong way. Lena's chest tightened as her eyes drifted to the photographs on the wall. For the briefest moment, she thought she saw Mia's eyes shift, tiny, impossible flickers, but when she blinked, the images were normal. She left the apartment, needing the outside world, sunlight, air that didn't hum, with whispered threats. The streets were busy, indifferent. People hurried past, unaware of the silent war that had raged just beneath their noses. Lena's heartbeat gradually slowed, but the sense of unease never truly left. In the following days, she tried to rebuild normalcy. Grocery shopping, work, coffee with neighbors. Yet the apartment called to her in subtle ways, the floorboards groaning with her every step, the shadows lingering longer than they should, the faint hum of electricity almost forming words if she listened too closely. And then the phone. A single notification, an image sent to her from an unknown number. Lena opened it, and her stomach sank. It was a photo of Mia, smiling, her face perfectly normal, standing in the apartment. Only the photo was distorted. The corners of the room seemed impossibly warped, bending inward. Lena's fingers trembled. She didn't know if it was real or a trick. Sleep remained elusive. Each night, Lena dreamed of shadows moving in familiar ways, Mia's laugh echoing, her hand reaching from impossible angles, whispers curling around her consciousness. She began keeping a journal, noting every anomaly, every faint echo of movement, every wordless message hidden in reflection or sound. Then, weeks later, she received a second image. This one was different. The photo showed herself, lying asleep on the couch, eyes wide, surrounded by shadows that resembled Mia in hundreds of imperfect copies. Lena dropped her phone, heart pounding. She realized the truth. The entity had not been destroyed. It had only been delayed. Patience was part of its nature. The lesson crystallized in her mind, crystal clear, terrifying. It wasn't the shadows, the whispers, or the imitations that were the most dangerous. It was memory, connection, and perception. The thing had learned from her love for her best friend, had studied the patterns of her life, and could twist them subtly to invade her consciousness. She had survived by anchoring herself to what was real, but the intrusion had left an indelible mark. And Mia, the real Mia, had returned in fragments, rescued perhaps, but altered. Her laughter was slightly delayed, her eyes occasionally distant. Lena realized some part of her friend had been replaced, or at least shared, by the thing. A fragment of the darkness lingered within her best friend, imperceptible to anyone else, and Lena would carry the knowledge of it forever. The apartment remained a place of shadows and whispers, quiet now, but never completely safe. Lena learned to accept the subtle distortions, to read the signs, and to stay alert. She couldn't undo what had happened, but she could survive it. Months later, Lena found herself on the balcony, staring at the city lights. The ordinary world was alive, mundane, oblivious. Yet she knew that lurking behind familiarity, in shadows, in mirrors, even in the memory of love, there could be something patient, intelligent, and relentless. A soft sound made her turn. The humming, a faint echo, carried from somewhere inside the apartment, or perhaps from her own mind. Lena clenched her fists, exhaling slowly. She understood now that survival wasn't about defeating the entity outright. It was about remembering who she was, what was real, and never letting the darkness claim her completely. Her gaze drifted to the photographs on the wall, Mia and Lena laughing at a summer festival, frozen in time. Lena smiled faintly, a bittersweet, fragile smile. She would fight to remember, fight to preserve the fragments of her best friend, fight to hold on to reality itself. And somewhere, in the faintest shadow, a whisper lingered. We are watching, we remember, we wait. But Lena did not run. She did not scream. She had learned the most vital lesson of all. Courage was not the absence of fear. Courage was surviving fear, walking alongside it, and holding on to truth even when the world twisted around her. The apartment remained her home. The shadows remained patient, and the entity waited. But Lena had survived. And in surviving, she had glimpsed the strength hidden in connection, memory, and love. Even in horror, humanity endured. The final image of the night was burned into her mind. Mia's smile in the photograph, perfect and real, framed against the faint, impossible bend of the apartment walls. Lena traced it with her fingers, a small, defiant act. She would remember. She would survive. And maybe, just maybe, the darkness could wait forever without winning.